I'm going to talk about the impact of government final consumption expenditure on Egypt's economic growth. This paper is co-authored by Dr. Abeer Rashdan, myself, Ahmed, Tarek, and Sylvia Bassem. In our outline, we're going to talk about the research importance, research objective, our hypothesis, our literature review, data and methodology, and our main findings, and we're going to talk at the end about our conclusion. First, I want to highlight Egypt's general government final consumption expenditure as a percentage of GDP. In 2023, it was 6.8%, which is a decrease from 8% in 2020. And it is significantly lower than the long-term average of 15% over the past 60 years. Egypt's government final consumption expenditure has decreased significantly, as we can see in the next slide, over the past 30 years. As in the 1990s, Egypt implemented economic reforms and structural adjustments to reduce its budget deficit by reducing its public expenditure and the average general government final consumption, as it was 10.87% in 1990s, as Egypt failed at the start in order to decrease its government final consumption as a percentage of GDP, as it increased to 11.85% in the early 2000s, and then it decreased to 10.14% in the second decade of the early 2000s. And it reached 7.2% in the past 3 years, as the government aimed to mitigate the deficit by reducing its spending. As we can see here, we can find that Egypt's general final consumption in the past 30 years has been significantly lower than the world and also the Arab world. We also here can see that there was no significant relation between general government final consumption and GDP growth. We wanted to explore the correlation between government final consumption expenditure and economic growth in Egypt, utilizing a yearly time series data from the 1990s to 2023. At the start of the research, we hypothesized that government final consumption had no impact on economic growth. We also had an alternative hypothesis of government final consumption having a positive impact on economic growth. We had a positive impact on, in our literature review, we found that there was a positive impact in a paper by Erdin and Holcomb that was conducted in 2005, which found that public spending stimulates private capital and investment, enhancing economic growth. A paper also by Phyllis in 2016 showed that productive public expenditure found that the share of current expenditure positively affected growth in developing countries. But in Egypt, a paper by Ahmed and Mohammed that was conducted in 2023 found that Egypt's government expenditure has been a significant financial stimulus for economic development, although the expenditure has also led to budget deficits and public debt issues. There were also papers by Madam Pari in 2016 which found that military expenditure negatively impacted growth in Turkey and Greece. A paper also by Tunick and Aydin in 2013 suggested optimal government expenditure for Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria should be between 22 and 25% of the GDP. Karavis in 2015 confirmed a non-linear relationship indicating that excessive government spending can hinder economic growth. In our data, we used the GDP growth rate as the explained variable, government expenditure, inflation, trade as a percentage of GDP, and the budget deficit as the explanatory variables. This study utilizes an ARDL model that includes time series indicated at 0 or 1. As you can see here, we found that the stationarity test had a mixture of I0 and I1, and when conducting the F-bound test, we found that there was indeed a long-run relation between the values. Regarding our long-run effects, we found that government expenditure negatively impacted GDP, potentially reducing long-term economic growth. Also, budget deficit may adversely affect long-term economic growth. From an inflation and trade openness standpoint, we found that both had a negative coefficient, but both were insignificant. When looking at the short-run effects, we found that changes in government expenditure had a negative and highly significant impact on GDP. Also, the budget deficit also had a negative and significant short-term impact on GDP. As well as inflation had a short-term negative effect, but wasn't as significant, as the degree of openness is marginally significant, indicating a potential negative short-term effect on the GDP. Short-run results and the Wald test indicate a significant influence of these variables on the GDP. We conclude that over the past 60 years, Egypt's foreign government consumption expenditure has declined significantly, reaching a high of 25.7% in 1972 to 6.8% in 2023. Government expenditure also had a negative impact in both the long and short-run effects, as it was a bit different from the past studies that we found. We can see that the correlation between government consumption and economic growth in Egypt is highly complex and non-linear, in which the relationship depends on various economic factors. Previous studies also support the findings that the positive impact in the long run can be held within a threshold of between 13 and 17%. Also, most government final consumption is a current expenditure, which may pose crucial challenges for economic growth in the short term, despite its economic benefits. It also needs to be revisited, considering transparency, governance, and fiscal sustainability. Thank you.